Hi everyone, I've spent a lovely couple of hours making a pop-up town. Here it is, this is Wonky Town and it's part of the file folder that I've been making. I made this last week and that's the hidden pocket and it's out of a file folder, and then on the back of that I've added a flap here and a couple of magnets to hold it closed, and then this is the pop-up town. So I'll bring it up to you. Some of the elements are stuck onto the base and most of the elements are pop-up. You are there. So let me show you how I made this. You can see, if I show you from the side view, you can just see how everything works. I'm working with the Wonky House papers, and I'll pop a link below in the notes if you're interested. In the last video I made these secret hidden pockets with the imagery, and I used a file folder for the construction, so I made two of them. Here's the other one, and with this one I'm going to make some pockets on the inside, and then with this one I've put this pocket on the back, and on the inside what I've done is I've added just a spare piece of file folder and I've scored it and made it a flip. I've added some papers, this is from the same collection, and I've popped a couple of magnets just in at the top here because I want to make a little pop-up city in mine, and so the magnets are needed because there'll be a little bit of bulk, so this will keep that pocket closed. So that's my starting point, is the background for my city. And then the imagery that I'm going to use, this is some of the pages I've printed from the kit. I've printed that same background, this one. I've printed this same background again on 160 GSM, and I've just folded it in half. You can see there I've folded it in half and glued it together, and that gives me a really nice sturdy piece of board which I'm going to make the mechanisms from the pop-out out of, and it'll become clearer later. The arms will be the same colour as the background, and that will help them to disappear. And this is the ephemera that I'm using from the kit. These are the Wonky houses, and I've printed off more than I'm going to need, but it'll give me a range of different sizes and colours to use in my little pop-up city. These ones will be too big, but these smaller ones will be great. And I love this page. I'm going to use these little welcome home and some letter boxes to decorate them. So that's what I've printed off, and what I want to do now is show you what I've learned in terms of building the construction. I strongly recommend, if this is your first time making pop-ups, and I'm not very familiar with them, I've been watching a channel by Duncan Birmingham called the Pop-Up Channel, and I'll link that below. And my recommendation is that you make a model, and so I'll show you the model I've made. This is just basically just to get me to understand what I can use and what works. So I've got the main mechanism with these two little arms, and you can see that those houses swing in and out, and then I've added little arms and other elements to make the city work. And the reason you need to make a model is it helps you understand the thickness of your paper and the smoothness of your paper. Does that work? My first model didn't work. I used paper that wasn't this lovely smooth cardstock, and it sort of gripped and the things didn't slide. Particularly these two pieces you can see that when they move, they actually slide along the paper. And so that's important. So making a model would be strongly recommended. And then it gives you an idea on how the pop-up elements work and how your images, whatever you're going to be using, will work, and whether or not you like what you've tried. It gives you an opportunity to pull it apart. It doesn't matter, it's just a model. So I'll get started and show you what I'm doing. As I said, I wanted, on these ones you can see I used a different colour to the background, and those arms stick out. That colour really stands out. So I wanted those arms to be the same colour as my background, which is why I've printed that. So for the main element, I need to cut this down. So I need a piece that's 1 1/4 inches wide by 5 1/4 inches long, and I'm going to score that at 3/4, 3 1/4, 4, and 4 3/4. And then I'm just going to fold and burnish each one of those score lines. The end two panels will be tabs, so I'm just going to trim both of those. So now what we've got with this part here, so these are my two smaller score lines there. What I'm going to need to do is I'm going to score from this point across to that point. Now I need to be fairly accurate with this, because this will be the folding mechanism. And I'm going to turn and do that as well on the opposite corner. So let me show you there. So you can see that I've got my two fold lines there, and then I've got that score line, and that score line, so a star pattern. So now I'm going to fold those, fold and burnish. And now I want to take these two triangles and train them to go in like that, and then pinch these 2 points together and make sure that these are all equal, and then score that. Flip it over and score the other side. So that's my main mechanism, and when that's in the book, that will pop out. So that's my main mechanism. Now if I bring my base in my case, I want it to lift. I want this panel to lift that main mechanism up. If I show you in the model there, and you can see that these triangular bits are at the top. And so to get this to work, I'm going to glue this into position with this tab at the top here. And on this model, for the size that I'm doing, and I've made this the same size, what I've done is I've come in about 1.5 inches. So I'll do the same here. So I want my mechanism to start 1.5 inches in, and that will give me room to add all of the elements that I want. So I want glue on the back of just this main tab. And make sure the glue goes to the very end, but you don't want it to seep out. So I'm just going to smooth that around. And then at the 1.5 inch mark, I'm going to sit this right at the top of the page and sit that down. Burnish it really well. So that's my main part, and now I want to put glue onto this tab. And then I'm just going to close this up with the glue now in place. Make sure that's nice and flat. And then I'm going to close this top cover and just give that glue time to grab. There's a fair bit of stress on this, so just make certain you give that glue time to grab. And so when I open that, you can see that that mechanism works really well. So I'm just going to sit that aside. So that's this main part here. So if I isolate the rest of it, that's this part here, the mechanism that drives all of that. The other part I've added to mine is this piece, and its mechanism, it's a bit hard to tell, is a rectangle. So I'm going to cut that next. So here's my board again. So for this one I need a strip that's 1/2 inch by 7 1/4, and I'm going to score this at 3/4, three and a quarter, four, and 6 1/2. Fold and burnish each one of those scores. And what you should have is, when you join these tabs together, is a rectangle. So I'm just going to glue that together. So I'm just going to sit my ruler there. And for this one I need to glue 2 sides, so this short side and one of the long sides. And then I'm going to squash it flat and sit it again right at that point where the pages meet. Try and get it straight. And then close and give that glue time to set. So these are the main 2 elements in mine. And just, this paper is quite thick. I'm just going to burnish that where I've placed the glue. So these are the main 2 elements that are going to make my pop-up work. I'll bring back the model again. So we've made this one with the moving arms here, and this one here. The other little elements that I've got here is I've made an extra little pop-up, and I'm going to make 2 of these, one here and one here. And these require 2 more little strips, and they're both 1/2 inch wide. So this one needs to be 4 1/2 inches. and I'm going to score it at 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this will give me a 1-inch box with just a little gluing tab. Like so. So I just want glue on this small tab. And this one is going to glue in place into that position. I'm not going to glue that just yet. The last piece I need is a strip that's 1/2 inch by 4.5, and I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch, 2 inches, 2.5 and 4, and that gives me another rectangular shape. If I bring back the model, and I'll show you that this little rectangle that I've made will sit into that position, like this one here. And I'm going to glue a house in the front of it before I glue it on. So that's that piece. And then this little piece, I'm going to experiment by sitting it up on there. And that will give me another place to have another little pop-up. So you can experiment by just adding these little bits. I could also, if I wanted to, have popped one in there like that, and had removed this and have something pop up there. That's why it's important to build a model, just to play with what you've got. So these are my main elements. This one's going to sit there, and this one's going to sit there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut out my ephemera and have a play with sitting things where I want them to sit, and then I'll be back. So after cutting those pieces out, this is what's left of my piece that I'm using. That's the piece of A4 that I cut in half, that I folded and glued in half. Then all I need now are these little arms that I'm going to use in various places, and I just need a couple of pieces that are 1/2 inch thick for that. And what I'm trying to achieve with my board is most of these arm pieces, you can see here, will sit on this background here. So I'm wanting to cut the colour that's going to go with that. So I'm going to cut it from this part that's got the little bit of blue in it. So I'm just going to cut a couple of 1/2 inch strips from that, and then they will be subcut. So bringing back the model, what I've done is I've just roughly laid out the pieces where I think they will go. So I've just got this yellow house with the pieces that I think might work around that, and then this little blue house, and I've just sort of tried to pop pieces. So I've kind of laid things out where I think they will go. And now it's just a matter of really experimenting and gluing one piece on at a time. So if I just put that aside, I know that on this piece I wanted to put this little box in front of it. So I want the house that's going to go there first. And in my case, I'm going to try and pop this one there. So I've left the bottom on it. I just need to really cut it so that this triangle on this part of the main mechanism is covered. And so I'm just going to try and sort of put that into position. And so I'm just going to cut a small amount and see if that's going to work. That's pretty good. I have inked mine, so if I make an extra cut, I'm just going to quickly ink it. So I'm going to pop that in there, and then just like in the model, I've got that small box that's going to sit in front of that. can see that there. And in front of that little box, I thought I'd sit that little red house like that. So to glue this on, I need to put glue onto this main piece here rather than onto the house. And I want the glue on this case just to go to that score line, not onto that part there. And so I'm just going to glue that on. And I'm trying to leave just the smallest of gaps at the bottom here, because I don't want this, when I fold that, I don't want this to be blocking anything. So just try one piece at a time, adhere it on, and then I'm going to put this little hinge on here. If I need to, it doesn't have, the width is not super important, it just needs to be strong enough. I'm just going to trim that a little bit. So when I hinge that on, it can be slightly to the side. I'll bring back the model. So I'm going to glue it along this side and the bottom, so it doesn't absolutely have to line up with the side of the house. So I'm going to put it slightly to the side. So in this case, on this back part, I'm going to leave a little bit that's not glued. And I'm going to glue all of that bottom piece that's going to sit on the base. And when I fold that, I'm just going to cover that little bit so I don't get glue everywhere. When that folds down, that needs to completely flatten out. So now that that's in place, I'm going to glue this little house on. And again, I just want to raise it up slightly so it's not completely hitting the bottom. And as you go, just make sure the glue's had time to dry and that these pieces are really glued on. And again, I'm going to put glue onto this smaller element. So now I've got my little houses that are going to sit out to the side. So in the model, these little ones here, and you can see that there's just that little strip to support them. And so really you're just choosing, I'm just choosing based on what's in the background where I'm going to cut my colours from. So I just need a strip that's going to hold this into place. And I'm just going to play with the length. So you're really just eyeballing it and working out what's going to work for you. And the angle as well, which is why it's important to make a model, the angle. So I've angled both of mine up slightly. You can play with that depending on what you put on and where you put it. So I'm putting a little dab of glue on the back of this and sitting that behind. And just pushing that into place. And then the same with this side piece, just roughly cutting a piece. You can always trim these down based on how the movement is working for you. And again, gluing that behind and pinching that into place. Now when you place these elements on, I would just experiment by putting just a little dab of glue on and trying to see if it closes, and then you can move it if need be. So just a tiny bit of glue, sit the house on, and then just close it to see that it's not going to hit any other element, and that's fine. And also that it's not protruding past the outside of your board, so that one's fine where it is. So I'm going to just glue that permanently with a bit more glue and just try and make sure I've got that in the same spot, and quickly just test that again. We can move over just a tiny bit so it's not protruding past. And then the other little house, I might pop that on that angle there. So again, just put a dot and just make sure it's going to close and it's fine on that angle. Okay, so you can see now with the model, so the pieces that we have done now, if I put them side by side, we've done this yellow house glued onto the back of that main piece. We've done the two little side houses and this little front house. And the other parts are these two arms. I'll try and show you here. That's these curved arms here. I've just cut those from a square of paper that's 2.5 by about 2, and then I've just roughly drawn and cut 2. They don't have to be perfectly accurate, I'm just giving you the idea, and you can adjust the length of those once you get them on. So I've cut out these two arms, and I'll show you on the model, which took a bit of experimentation. If I lay that flat, you can see that the arms are glued onto these little two top half triangles, and they're glued on an angle going up. So it's just a matter of experimenting with that. So these are the two top triangles here. So if I lay that out flat, I want to glue these arms onto those triangles and have them going up. And so I'm playing again for colour. So what you need to do here is, if I sit that flat, you want to trim this piece so that it doesn't go past this centre line. So I'm just going to trim it, just experiment a little bit with what works, trim it on that little angle so that I can glue that on and it doesn't go past that line or this line here. So it needs to fit in within those fold lines and it doesn't block them in any way. So in my case, I'm going to trim a little bit off just to make that fit. And again, just trimming so I can make certain that's going to sit there without getting in the way. So I'm going to glue the back of this now. And sit that on. I need enough contact that it's going to cover, and hopefully you can see that there, that it's within these fold lines and it isn't going to stop that hinge from rotating or block that main piece. So I'm going to do that with both pieces. I'll turn it so that you can see this time. So that will work there. and really give that glue time to set. What happens now with these pieces, as you open and close it, these arms rub against the back panel. So giving the glue time to set while it's in this open position is super important. And then now it's important that when you put your two pieces, your two little houses on, in my case I'm doing these two, you want to play with the positioning so that as it opens and closes, this side of this part doesn't go outside of the outer edge of the structure you're putting it onto, and the same, this one doesn't hit anything else that you've glued onto there. So it's just a matter of trial and error, and you can trim these arms down at any time. So a tip here is what I did with my model is I just popped a paper clip on and then experimented with opening and closing it, and you can see with this one, as I close it, it's going to sit outside, so that one's not going to work in that position. So I'll try it a bit lower. That's better. There's just that tiny little bit popping out, which I could either trim off, it's the top of the bird, or again just move a little bit until you get it right, and that's about right there. So now you can see this is the back of the arm there, so I'm just going to trim that off, and that's going to give me the guideline for where the house is going to sit. And just quickly before it dries, that's fine. And then the same with the house on the other side. This one here, just pop a paper clip on, and that's fine there. I might just straighten it up a little bit. And so you can see it coming together, and you just continue in this way, just working with one piece at a time until you get everything into position. So now I've got this other little element here, which I'm going to glue onto that position, and that will just give me that extra layer. Here's the model. That will just give me that extra layer to put another house up that way. So to do this, I'm going to glue this back panel first. And then once I'm happy that that's had a chance to dry, I'm going to glue this other piece here. I'm just going to do that by closing it, so it's closed into that position that I want it in. Okay. Now if I bring back the model, I can show you now that from these rectangular pieces, I've just popped arms out and added houses to that, and I've glued houses flat onto the background as well. So I'm going to play with adding those, and you can just watch along as I try and work that out. That's going to go over the edge, so I'm just going to quickly trim that down. And then I might cut that little birdie off and glue him on.